Welcome to the pre-application information session for the demonstration program on trauma-informed, victim-centered training for law enforcement on domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking program, also referred to as the Abby Honold program. My name is Jason Patry, and I am a grants management specialist. On behalf of the Office on Violence Against Women, also referred to as OVW, and the Grants to Improve the Criminal Justice Response program, also referred to as ICJR. The team is convening this pre-application session to go over the fiscal year FY 2024 solicitation for the Abby Honold program. Today, you will hear from OVW team members, including myself, LaShonda Beasley, Adam Schutzman, Alonda Thomas, and Debbie Tanaka, and we have Aisha Battle answering questions in the Q&A. The purpose of this session is to provide information regarding the Abby Honold solicitation. We will highlight a few key points in the presentation. However, it is not the intent, nor is there sufficient time to go over every aspect of the solicitation. All applicants are responsible for reading the FY 2024 Abby Honold solicitation and the OVW solicitation companion guide and ensuring that a complete application is submitted. Abby Honold program staff cannot provide any feedback to applicants about the quality of an applicant's proposal or provide any information outside what is presented in the solicitation. However, we will be available throughout the period of the solicitation is open to respond to any questions about application requirements. Please feel free to send questions about the Abby Honold solicitation to the Abby Honold program email box at ovw.abbyhonold@usdoj.gov or call the main line at 202-307-6026. We will also pause periodically throughout this presentation to answer your questions live. It will be helpful to have the Abby Honold solicitation in front of you for a point of reference during this information session. You may take a moment now to open it if you have not done so already. Also, these slides will be posted on OVW's website after the webinar. So please do not feel that you must remember everything that we tell you here. You may use the presentation alongside the solicitation and the companion guide as you prepare your application. Next slide, please. On the cover of the solicitation, please note that final applications are due in JustGrants by 8:59 p.m. Eastern Time on May 21st, 2024. Applications are submitted through a two-step process. Step 1 is the submission of the SF-424 and the SF-LLL in grants.gov no later than 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on May 17th, 2024. Step 2 is the submission of the full application, including attachments in the JustGrants system, or JustGrants, no later than 8:59 p.m. Eastern Time on May 21st, 2024. We recommend that applicants submit a letter of intent, which is optional and non-binding, to the Abby Honold program email box at ovw.abbyhonold@usdoj.gov no later than 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on April 16th, 2024. Please note that OVW will not accept late applications, so applicants are strongly encouraged to begin submitting their applications 48 hours prior to the application deadline and to carefully review the OVW policy on late submissions, which can be found on page 23 of the solicitation. OVW anticipates notifying all applicants of funding decisions by October 1st, 2024. Next slide. The Abby Honold program is authorized by 34 USC section 12513. The purpose is to support efforts to improve law enforcement's response to allegations of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking from the time of a victim's initial report throughout the entire investigation, and to promote the efforts of law enforcement in improving the response to these crimes. Next slide, please. The Abby Honold program encourages law enforcement agencies to integrate into their policies, trainings, and practices the 8 principles set forth in the Department of Justice's 2022 updated guidance on improving law enforcement response to sexual assault and domestic violence by identifying and preventing gender bias. If implemented, these principles would enhance victim safety, increase offender accountability, and promote agency trust within the surrounding community. We will talk more about this guidance later on. Next slide. This program supports the training of law enforcement to conduct investigations more effectively. The training and technical assistance for this program is provided by OVW-funded national training and technical assistance providers. Next slide. Over the course of the next several slides, we will discuss the Abby Honold statutory purpose areas to which applicants may apply. All applications must address both purpose areas. For those new to OVW grant programs, you may be wondering, what is a purpose area? Purpose areas provide the general guidelines on how funds are to be used under the grant program, as codified by Congress. We will discuss the purpose areas and then provide a few examples of how grant funds can be used to meet them. The Abby Honold program has 2 purpose areas that can be found beginning on page 6 of the solicitation. Funds under this initiative must be used for both statutory purpose areas listed on the next few slides. Next slide. Purpose Area 1, to train covered individuals within the demonstration site of the eligible entity to use evidence-based, trauma-informed, and victim-centered techniques and knowledge of crime victims' rights throughout an investigation into domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, including by. We'll get to the including by in a moment. But before we move on to the rest of the purpose area, let's first define covered individuals. A covered individual means an individual who interfaces with victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, including an individual working for or on behalf of an eligible entity, an administrator or personnel of a school, university, or other educational program or activity, including a campus police officer or a school resource officer, and an emergency services or medical employees. Next slide. A, conducting victim interviews in a manner that, Romanet 1, elicits valuable information about the domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, and Romanet 2, avoids re-traumatization of the victim. B, conducting field investigations that mirror best and promising practices available at the time of the investigation. C, customizing investigative approaches to ensure a culturally and linguistically appropriate approach to the community being served. Next slide. D, becoming proficient in understanding and responding to complex cases, including cases of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. Romanet 1, facilitated by alcohol or drugs. 2, including or involving strangulation. 3, committed by a non-stranger. 4, committed by an individual of the same sex as the victim. 5, involving a victim with a disability. 6, involving a male victim. Or 7, involving a lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, commonly referred to as LGBT victim. Next slide. E, developing collaborative relationships between Romanet 1, law enforcement officers and other members of the response team, and 2, the community being served. And F, developing an understanding of how to define, identify, and correctively classify a report of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. Next slide. Purpose Area 2, promote the efforts of the eligible entity to improve the response of covered individuals to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking through various communication channels, such as the website of the eligible entity, social media, print materials, and community meetings, in order to ensure that all covered individuals within the demonstration site of the eligible entity are aware of those efforts and included in trainings to the extent practicable. Remember, applications must address both purpose areas. Next slide. On this slide, we present several examples of ways Abby Honold funds may be used to support Purpose Area 1. These are just examples. They are not requirements, and this is not an exhaustive list. Salary and benefits of staff dedicated to and responsible for training law enforcement and other staff. Law enforcement officer time, including overtime pay to attend trainings. A project coordinator to enhance communication with OVW training and technical assistance providers. Staff and project partners time to collect, analyze, and report data, including but not limited to data OVW requires for performance reporting. Additional examples to address Purpose Area 1 can be found on page 7 of the solicitation. Next slide. This slide presents several examples of way Abby Honold funds may be used to support Purpose Area 2. Salary and benefits of staff dedicated to and responsible for outreach and community relations. Project partners' time to engage in outreach. Staff and project partners' time to develop website and social media content and to create print materials. Additional expenses, for example, equipment and/or supplies, needed to implement and sustain promotion efforts. Next slide. The Abby Honold program solicitation lists specific activities that are outside the scope of the Abby Honold program and will not be supported by this program's funding. Applications that propose activities deemed to be substantially out of scope may receive a reduction in points during the review process or may be eliminated from consideration. A complete list of out-of-scope and unallowable activities can be found on page 7 of the solicitation, and a complete list of unallowable costs beginning on page 17. It is important to review these lists thoroughly, as applications may receive a deduction in points during the review process, or they may be eliminated from consideration if they propose activities deemed to be substantially out of scope. Please note that out-of-scope activities include research projects, direct victim services, prevention activities, child abuse, sex offender registries, and curriculum development. You can find more information on these activities on page 7. The training curriculum for the Abby Honold program will be provided by OVW training and technical assistance providers. Please do not plan to develop your own curriculum or to send staff and project partners to training events that are not provided by OVW. However, applicants, if selected, should be prepared to adapt the curriculum to their community to address the unique characteristics and needs that exist in the community. Next slide. OVW does not fund activities that jeopardize victim safety, deter or prevent physical or emotional healing for victims, or allow offenders to escape responsibility for their actions. Please refer to page 7 of the solicitation and the OVW Solicitation Companion Guide for additional details. Please note, applications that propose any activities that compromise victim safety and recovery or undermine offender accountability may receive a deduction in points during the review process or may be eliminated from consideration entirely. Next slide. I am now going to hand it over to my colleague, LaShonda Beasley, who is going to walk us through the pertinent federal award information in the solicitation.
Thank you, Jason. We will now discuss federal award information as it pertains to the Abby Honold program, to include award period and amount, program requirements, eligibility, and related matters. Next slide, please. The solicitation provides details on the federal award information beginning on page 8. All awards are subject to the availability of appropriated funds and any modifications or additional requirements that may be imposed by law. There is no guarantee that funds will be available in the future. However, OVW may elect to make awards in a future fiscal year for applications submitted under this solicitation, but not selected for fiscal year 2024 funding, depending on the merits of the application and available funding. The Abby Honold program is making awards for up to $5,000 for a 36-month project period. Since this is the first year of the Abby Honold program, all awards will be processed as new and will be made as grants. OVW has the discretion to award grants for greater or lesser amounts than requested, and to negotiate the scope of work and budget with applicants prior to the award of a grant. Next slide. Recipients of a fiscal year 2024 Abby Honold Award will be required to participate in multiple program requirements. All award applicants are required to participate in OVW Training and Technical Assistance, or TTA. We have TTA providers who are nationally recognized experts and leaders in the field who will be there to support your project. to implement the principles set forth in DOJ's updated 2022 guidance on improving law enforcement response to sexual assault and domestic violence by identifying and preventing gender bias. We will talk more about this one later. Identify a project coordinator. It is essential to have a point person to run your projects. We have recognized that successful projects often benefit from having a project coordinator early on in the process. Conduct community education and outreach. Grantees will receive training on how to educate the community about the demonstration site efforts to improve its response to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, and will implement the training by conducting community education and outreach. Next slide. Additional program requirements are to conduct trauma-informed investigations. In order to meet the program requirements around trauma-informed investigations, award recipients will receive training on how to conduct trauma-informed, victim-centered, and offender-focused investigations. This training will include victim interviewing, interacting with historically marginalized populations, becoming proficient in responding to and building complex cases, and developing an understanding of how to define, identify, and classify crimes of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. Award recipients will then implement the training by conducting trauma-informed investigations of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. The second program requirement is to consult with a culturally specific and/or population-specific service provider and/or with the technical and training assistance provider about engaging culturally specific and/or population-specific community. We want to be sure that your projects are connecting with all members of communities and responding to survivors in an appropriate manner. To collect and report performance indicators. We will talk more about this in the next slide, but it is important to collect data and to track project progress and effectiveness. Details regarding these requirements can be found under the program requirements section of the Abby Honold solicitation. Next slide. Applicants will be required to collect and report performance indicators, including both those prescribed by OVW, but also those developed by the applicant. A performance indicator is a type of performance measurement used to evaluate the success of an organization's activities. It is a quantifiable measure of performance over time for a specific objective. Next slide. I will provide an example of a performance indicator. First, we need a goal or an objective. For this example, our goal will be to increase trauma-informed systems response to victims. We then need a performance indicator, some sort of measurable activity that we can easily track. An example of a performance indicator could be training devoted to trauma-informed practice. This is easily measured because we can track the number of trauma-informed training. Next slide. OVW has a couple tools available to assist you in developing performance indicators. First, we have a range of materials produced through OVW's Measuring Criminal Justice Success and Responding to VAWA Crimes project. We also have the performance reporting forms, instructions, training, and related tools on the VAWA Measuring Effectiveness Initiative webpage, which will help you understand the indicators that are prescribed by OVW. The proposal narrative section requires applicants to propose a set of meaningful performance indicators tied to the project goals and objectives. The recipients will track and report to OVW. Next slide. The Department of Justice 2022 updated guidance on improving law enforcement response to sexual assault and domestic violence by identifying and preventing gender-based violence is central to this solicitation and the Abby Honold program. This guidance, which includes 8 principles, is intended to reflect the advance the department's partnership with law enforcement leaders, patrol officers, detectives, and other law enforcement personnel who work tirelessly to ensure the policing is bias-free and to uphold the civil and human rights in the communities that they serve. The department extends its appreciation to the many law enforcement leaders, victim and community advocates, and the other experts who worked with us, developed the original guidance in 2015, and have provided insight to inform the updated 2022 edition. Furthermore, the department recognizes the law enforcement officers at all ranks and communities across the country work tirelessly to ensure the safety and justice for victims of sexual assault and domestic violence. Next slide. The guidance provides several principles for departments to incorporate into their policies and trainings in order to improve investigations and to ensure that victims of sexual assault and domestic violence receive a professional and appropriate response from law enforcement. The 8 principles are as follows. Principle 1, recognize and address biases, assumptions, and stereotypes about victims. Principle 2, treat all victims with respect. Principle 3, ensure that policies, training, supervision, and resource allocation support thorough and effective evaluation. Principle 4, appropriately classify reports of sexual assault or domestic violence. Next slide, please. Principle 5, refer victims to appropriate services. Principle 6, properly identify the predominant aggressor in domestic violence incidents. Principle 7, implement policies to prevent officer-perpetrated sexual assault and domestic violence and hold officers who commit these offenses accountable. Principle 8, maintain, review, and act upon data regarding sexual assault and domestic violence. Next slide. Remember, it is required that all applicants read and incorporate DOJ's 2022 updated guidance on improving law enforcement response to sexual assault and domestic violence by identifying and preventing gender-based bias and resource lists, which comprehensively defines and provides examples for how to implement the 8 principles. There is also a policing guidance resource list to support your efforts. Each resource can be found on the OVW website under the Resources tab by selecting Policing Guidance. Next slide, please. Eligibility is mentioned briefly on the cover of the solicitation, as well as in more details on pages 9 and 10. Eligible applicants include state, territorial, county, local, and/or tribal and law enforcement agencies that investigate crimes of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking in the United States or U.S. territories. States, units of local government, and tribal governments may apply on behalf of law enforcement agencies that lack authority to apply on their own. Next slide, please. The solicitation details other program eligibility requirements beginning on page 10, including required partnership. Please note that each applicant must partner with a national, regional, or local victim service provider. Applicants that do not meet this requirement will not be eligible for the Abby Honold program funding and will be removed from consideration. Formal partnership must be clearly documented in the form of a signed memorandum of understanding or MOU. Tribal applicants can submit a letter of commitment in lieu of an MOU, but must submit an MOU as a post-award deliverable if awarded. Next slide, please. Victim service providers is defined on page 11 of the solicitation. When making a decision on the victim service provider who will serve as the mandatory partner, be aware of a couple of key requirements in the definition. The victim service provider must, 1, be a nonprofit, non-governmental, or tribal organization or rape crisis center, including a state or tribal domestic violence or sexual assault coalition that assists or advocates on domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking victims, including a domestic violence shelter, faith-based organization, or other organization. And 2, must have a documented history of effective work concerning domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and/or stalking. I will now hand it off to Adam Schitzman to discuss additional application information.
Thank you. Next slide, please. I will now review the Abby Honold application and submission information. Next slide. A letter of intent serves to certify that an applicant is registered and current with the System for Award Management, SAM, under Unique Entity Identifier, UEI number. The letter of intent for the Abby Honold solicitation is due no later than April 16th, 2024 by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. This letter is optional and does not obligate the applicant to apply. Next slide. Formatting and technical requirements. Please carefully review the formatting and technical requirements on page 12. Points may be deducted for applications that do not adhere to the formatting and technical requirements. Please read the entire list of requirements. I will go over that list. Double-spaced. Charts may be single-spaced. 8.5 by 11-inch pages. 1-inch margins. Please note this change from prior years. The application must be written in Arial font, type no smaller than 11 point, except for footnotes, which may be 9 point. Page numbers, no more than 15 pages for the proposal narrative. Documents in the following formats: Microsoft Word .doc, PDF files .pdf, or text documents .txt, and headings and subheadings that correspond to the sections identified throughout the application and submission information section of the solicitation. Next slide, please. Applicants must include all of the following required documents, which will be attached to the application in JustGrant: the proposal narrative, budget detail worksheet and narrative, and a signed memoranda of understanding, MOU. Next slide, please. In addition to the 3 items from the previous slide, applicants must submit a proposal abstract. The proposal abstract will be entered into a text box in JustGrants. Though it will not be scored, it will be used throughout the review process. Applicants are strongly encouraged to use the template provided in the solicitation for the abstract. Next slide. Data requested with application. The data requested with application consists of 3 sets of questions: the pre-award risk assessment, applicant questionnaire, and the summary data sheet. You will complete each as a survey directly in JustGrants. These are not scored, but are a required element of your application. A list of the questions for each item is included on pages 41 through 47 of the solicitation in the appendices. Next slide. Proposal narrative. The proposal narrative section should not exceed 15 pages double-spaced and must include the required 3 sections: the purpose of proposal, what will be done, and who will implement the proposal. Reviewers will not read more than 15 pages double-spaced. If your application is not double-spaced, reviewers will only read the equivalent of 15 double-spaced pages, and the remainder of the proposal narrative will not be scored. Make sure that you respond to every question within each of the sections. Headings and subheadings that correspond with the sections identified in the solicitation are highly recommended. See pages 13 to 16 of the solicitation for more information. Next slide. In developing the proposal narrative, applicants are strongly encouraged to review the DOJ's 2022 law enforcement guidance, as familiarity with this guidance is necessary to address questions asked in the what will be done section. The who will implement section should correspond to the roles of key personnel and or roles listed in the what will be done section. When developing the proposal narrative, as stated earlier, headings and subheadings that correspond to the sections identified in the solicitation should be used. The headers should label the purpose of the proposal, what will be done, and who will implement sections. Please ensure that your answers appear in the session in which the question was asked in the proposal narrative section of the solicitation when you are addressing the proposal narrative prompts. For example, in the What Will Be Done section, you are asked to detail your goals and objectives. This information should be addressed in the proposal narrative in the What Will Be Done section and not the purpose of the proposal section. Next slide. Question number 1 in the What Will Be Done section includes a sample chart. Applicants are strongly encouraged to use the sample chart when formatting their answer to the first question in the What Will Be Done section. It is in this chart that applicants will identify the performance indicators that have been selected for the project. Performance indicators should identify 1, the data to be collected, 2, the sources or sources of that data, 3, the frequency the data will be tracked and reported to OVW. As mentioned, applicants may find it helpful to consult materials produced through OVW's Measuring Criminal Justice Success in Responding to VAWA Crimes project. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the budget detail worksheet and narrative. This section must include a budget worksheet and budget narrative that links clearly to the project activities specified in the proposal narrative. Budget must span the entire 36-month period and not be divided by year. The budget should include sufficient funds to provide meaningful access or describe in-kind resources available for people with disabilities, the deaf and hard of hearing, or persons with limited English proficiency. The budget should not contain items that are unsupported by the proposal narrative. You should include your budget as an attachment to your application. A sample budget is included as an appendix to the solicitation, and a webinar on creating a budget is available on the OVW website. Next slide, please. Additionally, the budget must include funds to attend OVW-sponsored training and technical assistance, or TTA, in the amount of $15,000 for applicants located in the 48 contiguous states and $20,000 for applicants located in the U.S. territories, Hawaii, and Alaska. Next slide, please. Memorandum of Understanding and Letters of Commitment. We will now discuss the Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, and Letter of Commitment, or LOC, requirement. Please carefully review the distinction between these two documents on page 19 and identify which is required for your organization. Next slide, please. Applicants are required to submit an MOU, a document containing the terms of the partnership and the allocation of roles and responsibilities between two or more parties. The MOU must be a single document and be signed and dated by the authorized representative of each proposed partner organization during the development of the application. As a required partner, the victim service provider must be included as a signatory on the MOU. If missing signatures, an MOU may receive a point deduction or removal from consideration, especially for applications missing a signature from their required partner. Next slide, please. Letters of commitment, tribal applicants only. If unable to submit a signed MOU, tribal law enforcement agencies or tribal governments applying on behalf of a tribal law enforcement agency may submit a letter of commitment from each partnering organization. If funding, the tribal applicant will be required to submit a signed MOU as a post-award deliverable. Next slide, please. Now, please help me welcome Alanda Thomas, a budget analyst with the OVW Grants and Financial Management Division, or GFMD, as they will go into more detail about the budget requirements.
Good afternoon. In the next couple of slides, we are going to focus on aspects of your application that relate to the documents that our financial team, the Grants Financial Management Division, GFMD reviews. More specifically, we'll discuss some items that GFMD has identified from prior year's applications that could help with expediting our review process. So for today, we're going to highlight certain aspects of the pre-award risk assessment and provide you with a link to a detailed webinar on how to develop the budget that will be included in your application. First, we'll highlight the items identified in the summary data sheet, which is completed by all applicants. Specifically, one item that we would like to discuss are the single audit response. OVW requests that all applicants provide a statement as to whether they have expended $750,000 or more in federal funds during their last fiscal year. If they have, then they indicate that and also specify the end date of their last fiscal year. However, GFMD is finding that applicants do not always include all of this information. Please ensure that this question is answered in its entirety on the summary data sheet, question number 3. Next slide. The next item that we'd like to discuss is the pre-award risk assessment questions, which assists GFMD during their pre-award risk assessment review for all applications. Each applicant must prepare a response to all 11 questions, and each question has multiple parts. We've noticed from prior years that applicants do not always fully answer all the parts of the question, which in turn requires GFMD to reach out to the applicant and which may delay funding decisions. Some of the most common issues that we've encountered have been, for example, question number 2, where the applicant indicates they do indeed have internal policies, but they don't provide a brief list of topics covered in the policies and procedures. On question number 3, some applicants fail to provide a brief summary of the organization's process for tracking expenditures, and more specifically, whether or not it tracks budgeted versus actual expenditures. These are just a few examples, but in general, please make sure that you read each piece of each question and provide a full and comprehensive response. Next slide. This next slide will quickly highlight some resources that are available as you're creating the budget to be submitted with your application. Over the last couple of years, GFMD has developed a detailed webinar presentation on how to develop a budget to be submitted with OVW applications. This presentation addresses some of the challenges that you may face with your budget and provides some insight on OVW's budget review process. This webinar can be found at the link on this slide. Slide 47. Next up is the uniform guidance, which can be found at 2 CFR 200. Use your favorite search engine for this one. Other resources include the DOJ Financial Guide and the solicitation itself. Next slide. One more slide. We know that this can be a lot of information to process, so if you have any questions at all about the GFMD information discussed, please feel free to contact the GFMD Help Desk at 1-888-514-8556 or by email at ovw.gfmd@usdoj.gov. I would recommend you emailing us directly because you'll most likely get a faster response. We usually take up to 48 hours to get back to you, but we generally get back to you sooner than that time. I will now hand it over to Debbie Tanaka to give you all an overview on how to apply to the solicitation using the two-step application submission process.
Great, thank you so much, Alenda. And we can move to the next slide. You may find this funding opportunity on grants.gov by using the CFDA number, grants.gov opportunity number, or the title of this solicitation, all of which can be found on the cover page. The FY 2024 application submission process is a two-step process with significant differences from the process prior to 3 years ago. Application materials will be submitted in grants.gov and Just Grants. We recommend starting the application process, even just the grants.gov and Just Grants registration process, as soon as possible to allow time for registration or renewal and to learn the system. Next slide, please. Read the solicitation carefully to understand all steps required to submit an application and the time required to complete those steps. Some steps, such as obtaining a unique entity identifier or UEI number, or registering with the System for Award Management, or SAM, or grants.gov, may take several days to complete. We recommend that applicants begin these processes as soon as possible, but no later than April 9th, which is today, suggested in the solicitation, which as a reminder is today. Next slide, please. Applicants must complete the application for federal assistance or SF-424 in grants.gov. The specific information required for this step is included on page 12 of the solicitation. Applicants must also complete and submit the disclosure of lobbying activities or SFLLL in grants.gov. Next slide, please. After submitting these two forms, the applicant will receive an email notification to complete the rest of the application in Just Grants. If the applicant is a new user in Just Grants, the email will include instructions on registering with Just Grants. Next slide, please. Applicants will submit the full application, including attachments, in Just Grants. If you have applied for OVW funding prior to 2 years ago, you will notice some significant changes in the application process. In the Just Grants system, applicants will enter some application information directly into the text boxes and surveys and upload some documents as attachments. We have included the following major elements of the application as examples of what applicants will submit in Just Grants. The proposal abstract will be entered in a text box. The pre-award risk assessment, applicant questionnaire, and summary data will be completed as surveys directly in Just Grants. The proposal narrative, as well as the budget worksheet and budget narrative, will be uploaded as attachments. The Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, or Letter of Commitment, or LOC, will be uploaded as an attachment. In addition to these major elements, other documentation will be required for all applications or when applicable. Read the solicitation carefully for a full description of all items required. Next slide, please. In Just Grants, each applying entity will have an assigned entity administrator who is responsible for managing entity-level information and assigning roles in the system. The entity administrator is also the e-business point of contact, or e-biz POC, designated in sam.gov. For more information on registering with Just Grants, please refer to the website justicegrants.usdoj.gov. Next slide, please. Within 24 hours of Just Grants receiving your application from grants.gov, the user submitting the application in grants.gov and the SAM eBiz POC will receive an email to register for a Just Grants account. The email is from DOJ's Secure User Management System, or DIAMD, and will include instructions on how to create an account. To ensure that you receive these emails and that they are not flagged as spam, we recommend adding the email address of DIAMD-no-reply@usdoj.gov to the trusted sender list in your email settings. Next slide, please. The eBiz POC, as the applicant organization, serves as the entity administrator and must log in to Just Grants to confirm the entity's profile and add users. The user submitting the application in Just Grants serves as the application submitter. Within minutes of completing their Just Grants account registration, the application submitter and the entity administrator will receive an email from Just Grants with a link to the application that was started in grants.gov. Alternatively, the application submitter can log in to Just Grants and locate the pending application in their work list on the home landing page. The application number listed on Just Grants will be identical to the 9-digit number that begins with quote-unquote grant on grants.gov. Next slide, please. Each lead applicant must have at least one authorized representative designated on Just Grants. An authorized representative is an individual with documented authority to sign an agreement with the federal government. Before the application is submitted, the entity administrator must log in to Just Grants to review the authorized representatives associated with the organization. If an authorized representative does not have a Just Grants account, the entity administrator will need to invite them to register. Within minutes of being invited to be an authorized representative, the individual will receive an email from DIAMD-no-reply@usdoj.gov with instructions on how to create an account in DOJ's Secure User Management System. Once the authorized representative receives the email and completes the steps to create an account, the authorized representative will be available in Just Grants. Next slide, please. The application submitter will complete the application by entering data into web-based forms and text boxes, uploading attachments, and accepting assurances and certifications. The application submitter will also need to select the authorized representative. Once all sections are completed, the application submitter will submit the application. The application submitter, entity administrator, and authorized representative will then receive an email from Just Grants confirming successful submission of the application. Next slide, please. The Department of Justice has made a collection of self-guided training resources, including training and a virtual Q&A session on application submission, available at the website displayed on this slide, justicegrants.usdoj.gov/training. I will now hand it back to Jason Petrie to finish the presentation so that we can address any questions you may have. Jason?
Thank you, Debbie. Recipients of OVW funds must comply with applicable federal civil rights laws, which, among other things, prohibit recipients from discriminating on the basis of national origin and disability. This includes taking reasonable steps to ensure meaningful access to grantees' programs and activities for individuals with disabilities. Individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing, and individuals with limited English proficiency. Applicants must include funds or other resources in their budgets that support activities to ensure access for these individuals. Next slide. The SF 424 and SFLLL are due in grants.gov no later than 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on May 17th, 2024. Final applications are due in Just Grants by 8:59 p.m. Eastern Time on May 21st, 2024. Carefully review the How to Apply and the Submission Dates and Times sections on pages 21 through 23 of the solicitation for applicant actions with required deadlines and for OVW's policy on late submissions. Submitting the application components at least 48 hours before each deadline, grants.gov or Just Grants as applicable, will enable applicants to receive notice of failed submission and provide an opportunity to correct the error before the application deadline. Next slide. If you have questions, for programmatic questions, email ovw.abbyhonold, ABBYHONOLD, at usdoj.gov or call 202-307-6026. For financial questions, email ovw.gfmd@usdoj.gov or call 1-888-514-8556. For technical questions with grants.gov applicant support, email support@grants.gov or call 800-518-4726. For OVW Just Grants applicant support, email ovw.justgrants support@usdoj.gov or call 866-655-4482. Next slide, please. Now we will turn to the Q&A to answer the questions that were submitted throughout the presentation. You may also ask your questions live if you are comfortable doing that. We just ask that you raise your hand, your virtual hand, and we can call on you. We'll start with the question in the Q&A. The question is, what if we only want to apply for training and printed materials? How will we utilize most of the $500,000 budget? I know $15,000 is required for travel to the OVW TTA programs, but if the training curriculum is already provided, what exactly is the grant funding? This is a great question because, and to point out and make it clear that the training is provided by OVW's training and technical assistance providers. So the question, if you are not developing training, what exactly are you using the grant money for? We provide a few examples of how the funds can be used on page 7 of the solicitation. But in general, I would encourage you to think about a couple things. First is, what does it cost for your organization to receive training? So that might be funds for salary and fringe benefits of a training coordinator, or somebody who will be the point person between the OVW training and technical assistance provider and your agency. Perhaps it could be used for police officer time to attend that training. And that could be regular time or overtime to attend the training that's being provided. That could include staff time to tailor the training that is being provided by our technical assistance provider to the needs of your community. It is also can be used for time to create, to collect and report on those performance indicators that we talked about, and for any outreach. So yes, creating materials, but maybe staff time developing those materials, the cost of printing those materials. It can be used for a number of things, but again, I just really encourage you to think about what it costs for you to receive training, for your department to receive that training, for you to implement that training within your organizations and with your partner organizations as well. The next question I see is, can we modify or adjust the curriculum to include our agency policies and local concerns? So yes, it's our intention that you will receive the training from our training and technical assistance provider, but then you tailor it to the needs of your local community, whatever those needs might be. Because this is this training is nationally oriented, some things may need to be adjusted in order to fit your community needs, and we expect that from each of the selected applicants. So there will be room to make that happen.
Jason, may I add just a little bit more to that?
Sure.
Throughout the presentation, I know that what was also highlighted was there's a required partnership with the victim service provider. And the hope is that, to what Jason said, that you would adapt this to your community and that you would utilize that victim service provider to assist in the adaptation and represent the voice of survivors or the different groups that make up your community. Thank you.
Those are all the questions I see in the Q&A at the moment. Oh, we have a couple more. All right. First one. So to clarify, we get the curriculum approved and we can have our personnel give the training, is there a train the trainer requirement for the TTA? So the training will come to you. The OVW training and technical assistance providers will provide that training to your organization. Now, yes, I that could include training trainers that would continue that training over time, right? But it also provides an opportunity for you to bring the relevant staff, law enforcement officers, to the training when it is being provided by that training and technical assistance provider. I hope that answers your question. And if it does not, feel free to ask for clarification or hop on. You can raise your hand and ask it live. The next question, can you use funding to pay for translation and interpretation services to be used when interviewing with victims, or is that considered direct services? So the grant program is really focused on the training component, training your agency on victim-centered, trauma-informed investigations for law enforcement. Conducting the investigations themselves is not really part of the Abby Honold program. Again, it's really focused on getting your law enforcement agency trained and doing the outreach around, the training that you are receiving. Aside from that, I think you do bring up an important point about interpretation services. So again, that not directly for your interpretation when interviewing victims, but being able to provide interpretation and language access is a required component for the budget, and make sure you are addressing that budget component, which is listed in the solicitation. Barbara? I see your hand raised, Barbara. If you want to unmute and ask your question, we can take it now.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't allowed to unmute earlier.
Sorry.
So just to clarify, you're saying that the TTA will actually come to our agency to give the actual training? Is that what this is about?
Yes,
Okay.
that is what is anticipated. So
Okay.
your
So
agency
it's
will receive this training.
okay. So it won't be. So what I was thinking is for the TTA to work with our training cadre to formulate like the full curriculum, the flow of the training and whatnot. But usually our cadres go out to the trainings to the officers. So would that be allowed for this grant program?
Jason, I can speak to that.
Okay.
Yes, it will. I think the reason why Jason is giving scenarios of the different ways training will be conducted is because in reviewing your grant applications, that we will be adapting the training to what makes sense for your communities. Some communities have training cadres, some their training may be limited to we can only do roll call training. Some trainings, some organizations may be able to support in-person, maybe class training time. And so that will be considered in the way that the training is delivered to the individual sites.
Yes, exactly my point, because I was thinking, or we're thinking that during the planning process of honing into the final curriculum, it could be a roll call so that TTA won't be able to go to all the different roll calls all across the city. So thank you for the clarification.
Well, I will say, Barbara, just to let you know, that is a possibility for our TA. We have had just in general TA go to and do roll call trainings around the clock to train a community. And so we can have those discussions.
Thank you, but it is not limited to just the TA giving the training, because that would, I guess, impact the availability of the.
Oh, no, they will be providing training to the people that also train in your communities to provide the training.
Okay, thank you. So in effect, it will also pay for the cost for our trainers to go out to the different divisions, to the officers and to the community, right?
That's what you would include in your budget.
Yes. All right. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. Jason, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Aisha. We have another question in the Q&A. What other roles should the victim service provider play? Do they need to participate in training sessions or help conduct community outreach? So the victim service provider is there to help you tailor the training to your specific community and the needs of victims in your community. So as Aisha was talking about how each of the sites will tailor that training to your specific needs, that may be needs of how the training is provided across your organization, but that also may be training content and meeting the needs of victims in your community. That's an important role for the victim service provider to play. And outreach, as you mentioned, also to make sure that the efforts that you are engaged in are that your community is being made aware of the efforts that you are engaged in to be trauma informed and victim centered in your law enforcement response. All right. Not seeing or hearing any questions. If questions do come up, remember you can email us at ovw.abbyhonold, ABBYHONOLD @usdoj.gov, and we'd be happy to answer those questions. Can we see the next slide, please? Okay. Well, good luck, everyone. If you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. That is it for today's webinar.